Hi all, so here we are today taking a first look at The Division on PC. Now a lot of the things I'm going to be saying here today do apply to the Xbox One and PS4 version as well, but specifically all of the footage you're seeing today is captured on PC, and my thoughts are really tuned to that system. So first off, what is The Division? Well, The Division is a Tom Clancy-based story really, set in a almost post-apocalyptic New York after a virus has started to wipe everybody out. Basically, anarchy is starting to reign supreme within New York with various factions. What's left of the civilian population is still wandering the streets, and as part of an elite unit called the Division, basically called in when all else has failed, you're going to have to clean up New York. Now, story-wise, it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's walking along a lot of the same old tropes we've seen many times before in so many different films and books, but here it actually feels quite nicely done. Given the interactive nature of gaming, when we have the cutscenes there, when we have this world that we're kind of interacting with and really feeling part of this story, it does work exceptionally well. Certainly better than Destiny anyway. And that's really the biggest comparison I think we're going to see between The Division and other games. It's, well, how does The Division do it in comparison to Bungie's Destiny? Now, during my playthrough yesterday, I got to level 10, and I think level 7 in the Dark Zone. Now this was a pretty good opportunity to kind of see how the game is going to open up after we get past those initial levels we saw in the open beta. Now I have to say, I was expecting the missions to be, well, a little bit more weak than they actually are. I thought they would be sort of over in 10 minutes and then often on we go to something else. But actually, they're quite substantive pieces of content. When you've got 3 or 4 of your teammates with you, or 3 teammates with you, 4 of you in total, these are quite a nice slog. They're difficult. You will have to work as a team. You'll have to flank the enemy. It really does get you working well together. Again, unlike Destiny, which was always just a little bit of stand there, shoot, do a bit of dodging, this will keep you on your toes constantly. You'll have to move from cover to cover. When it comes to those big bosses, you're going to have to watch each other's backs as well. When a boss basically pops up behind you, you're dead pretty quickly, it has to be said. Now, the way the talents and perks and so on work, now, this is probably the most interesting part of The Division, because it really is RPG light. You're not necessarily going to be buffing individual skills like your accuracy or anything. That comes through better weaponry, scopes, and so on, where you'll get additional bonuses to things like headshots. But those perks, they open up the classes themselves, so you can create things like medics, a healing class, or a class that's really about buffing up your team's ability to survive the damage that's incoming. You've then got, obviously, the damage class as well, about putting out maximum amount of damage with things like turrets. And it works exceptionally well, I have to say. I was expecting less variety here, and I was expecting, frankly, to everyone to be just using the same healer builds. And whilst that is sort of true, towards my end of my play session yesterday, I was starting to see a lot more variety coming through from my teammates. And again, that really does change up how these missions go about. One slight concern I had regarding the mission structure is when I actually checked, I'd already completed 37% of the game last night. Now, when I looked at 37%, I thought to myself, well, hang on, I've really only got to level 10, and I've only mostly, I would say probably 70% of my time, I was doing the storied missions. Now, I wasn't rushing particularly, but at the same time, I wasn't spending an awful lot of time on the side show, as it were. When I did go and have a look at the side missions, they're actually quite nice and varied. They tend to be in the world, as it were, so it's a lot of things like defend this location, etc. Not bad at all. And again, the dynamic of having them on the open world is interesting. When we start to look at the Dark Zone, this is an area where I didn't get to spend much time in beta, so I didn't really get under the skin of it. It was, at the time, difficult to find a team to go and explore the Dark Zone with. But last night, after I spent a bit of time with one particular group of French gamers, in fact, whilst communication wasn't the easiest, the fact that we all kind of knew what we were doing kind of helped quite a bit. Now, when we ventured into the Dark Zone, things became really interesting. This became almost a game of cat and mouse, purely because at some point, and I'm not too sure quite what happened here, someone on our team killed another player. Now, we're not completely sure why he did it. He ran around a corner, we followed him, and the next thing we knew, he was just laying into this guy. So we joined in, obviously. At that point, we then triggered a going rogue. Now, what was quite interesting is we turned around at that point to see another group of agents. Those agents turned tail and ran away as fast as they possibly could. We chased them, naturally. Unfortunately, they got away from us. But this then sort of led on to well, we've got loads of cool loot now. We're going to have to try and get out of the dark zone. Cue to one of the evacuation points. Now, at this point, we're obviously still rogue, and there does seem to be a number of agents hanging around. But for whatever reason, they didn't attack us and we didn't attack them. But there is something here about that personal story. The fact that this is something that happened that was an emergent piece of gameplay. This wasn't the computer or the developers giving us this opportunity and saying, hey, play this. This purely happened because of us being random human beings. And it made it something really interesting. Now, whether the Dark Zone itself is going to have that sustainability, I'm not too sure. Really, I think it's going to come down to how much content there is, but also how fast people level up and become a little bit uber at the Dark Zone. With new kind of look at the loot that you can get there, there does seem to be some pretty awesome loot. So again, it's going to really depend on how much people grind on that. I think in some respects I might have liked some structured PvP here as well, rather than this open nature PvP that we kind of have. Certainly the Dark Zone is interesting. Longevity, I think, could be an issue there. Now, let's talk about the performance. This is an area that's quite interesting with the Division. What I found was on our 970 GPU by KFA, which is no slouch, it has to be said, along with a 16 gig of RAM in our system and a Core i7 4790. Performance is excellent, with only occasional frame rate dips. And when I say occasional frame rate dips, I'm talking wanders down into the 55 to 57 range. Not game-breaking by any stretch of the imagination, and it does seem to be mostly volumetrics that are causing the problem there, fogs and smoke, etc. Now, one curious thing that has me a little concerned on the performance side of things. Like I say, rock solid 60 performance, up until the point where a fourth agent is added to the team, at which point my frame rate goes insanely fluctuating. And I'm basically talking about a frame rate that can wander anything from 60 frames a second down to as low as 45. Why this happens when you add the fourth agent is a little bit strange, because it doesn't seem to matter whether it's a firefight, where you would expect, an extra person pumping out extra damage and more calculations with the CPU to keep track of would cause a bottleneck. But this just seems to be a fourth agent on the team and boom, performance drops. It's quite odd, and I think this might be a slight bottleneck. What I think we might be seeing here is purely a CPU limiting situation. I'd be interested to know what other people have discovered on this one, and do let me know what CPU you happen to be running, and maybe we can get to the bottom of that. When I've run the benchmarking tool built into the Division, it doesn't seem to be utilising 100% of the GPU or 100% of the CPU. Now, for a benchmark tool, that's a little bit strange. Normally, we would expect it to be pushing as hard as absolutely possible. So again, is the benchmark tool maybe not all that representative of the real-world performance of the game engine when it has four agents on a team? There does seem to be a bit of a bottleneck here. I'm going to be looking into that one to see if we can uncover exactly what's gone on. Now, the Division. This is Ubisoft's opus in many respects. They have had a terrible couple of years, and with the last Assassin's Creed game, they've managed to buy back some goodwill with me. A very good game, and so with the Division, we were certainly hoping that they would continue this good form, putting the gamers first and putting the quality up there as well. Have they succeeded? Is the Division a winner? Well, certainly at this stage, 37% of the game completed, yes, I want to play more. I may be not as invested into the story as I am into the gameplay, but absolutely they have built a fantastic third-person cover shooter here. They've built a fantastic team game here. They've got a really nice-looking game engine that feels fluid and a world that feels lived in. They've achieved the very things they actually promised us. Pretty much. I think we can argue around the edges a little bit about some of the graphical fidelity, etc. But by and large, they have nailed it. Absolutely. So, if you're sitting on the fence with a Division, here is what I would say. Stop sitting on the fence, grab your gun, New York needs some saving, damn it.